What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Raptors Report. It is time to talk about the Toronto Raptors. But before we do that, we've got a quick shout out to give up for today's video, and that goes out to Kevin. So, Kevin, thank you so much for supporting this channel through your likes and comments. It is very much appreciated. Let's talk about the Toronto Raptors because we got some very big news coming out today. Evan Sidri was reporting that the Raptors are open to trading Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, Davion Mitchell, and Kris Boucher for second-round picks. Toronto looms large as a potential facilitator in the Jimmy Butler trade as well. So, of course, they've got a lot of expiring contracts, which they can help facilitate trades as well. Not only Jimmy Butler, but just in general, and considering how many playoff teams and contenders do not have a lot of cap space to begin with, having a lot of expiring contracts like Bruce Brown, Davion Mitchell, Kris Boucher, the Raptors have positioned themselves to really well ahead of the NBA trade deadline. But let's quickly take a look at the Raptors salary cap situation to fully understand when we talk about some of the players that the Raptors wish to trade. And one of the most important things when we talk about the Toronto Raptors, of course, besides the fact that Bruce Brown's got an expiring contract of $23 million, it's also Davion Mitchell and Kris Boucher as well. Now, particularly when we talk about Davion Mitchell, I did a video earlier before the season started, and I predicted that the Raptors would move him eventually because they have someone, Jamal Shed, who can kind of replicate some of what Davion Mitchell can do. And just considering how much defense Davion Mitchell brings, and you're a contender, and you're looking at someone like Davion Mitchell, $6.4 million isn't a ton, in terms of taking on money in return. The big question for the Raptors will be, what are they looking for in terms of salary filler and picks as well? Now, when we talk about contending teams giving you picks, this is where it gets tricky because even let's say you're a top 3, top 4, top 5 team in each conference, that ends up being a pick in the late 40s or early 50s. Is that really attractive to a team like the Toronto Raptors? Not necessarily, if you ask me. I mean, the fact that a player in the 50s you draft might even end up playing quality minutes in the NBA with respect to them is very low as well. So if I'm the Toronto Raptors and I'm looking to trade, particularly for someone like a player like Davion Mitchell, one thing I can convince a lot of teams is you're going to need good guard play during playoff time. And just considering some of the teams that are, top contenders team, particularly in the Eastern Conference, you look at the Boston Celtics, they got Derek White, they got Drew Holiday, who are good defensive guards. And, this kind of entices other playoff teams to want to rival that as well. And in particular, even more so when you face a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers, you got, of course, Davion Mitchell there. Not Davion Mitchell, correction, sorry, Donovan Mitchell. And then you got, of course, Darius Garland as well. Now, I'm not saying Davion is going to lock them down, but just seeing how he was able to do a really good job on Trae Young recently, it absolutely is a great selling point. Now, for the Raptors, again, second-round picks are decent if they're, 3-4 years from now, because you can use them in potential future trades to get yourself a good role player, just like how the Raptors are selling some of their role players. But if I'm the Toronto Raptors, what I try to do when I'm trading some of these players is try to acquire younger players or players that don't necessarily fit on other teams. And one particular player like that comes to mind is Ochai Agbaji. So when the Raptors traded their first-round pick last year, they traded for Kelly Olynyk and Ochai Agbaji, and that's what I believe the Raptors should fairly do in terms of just trying to acquire good players rather than just simply taking on bad salary and getting, second-round picks as well. Now, in terms of Kris Boucher, this is a player I wanted to mention as well because he has been in the rumor mill for several seasons now. He's the last piece of the Toronto Raptors championship run as well. But the question here becomes, are you simply just taking on bad salary for second-round picks that aren't going to be really useful? Let's be honest. I mean, picks in the late 40s aren't really great return as well, but also you're not exactly expecting a second-round pick from teams like the Portland Trail Blazers as well, or even a heavily protected first-round pick as well. So this is where it gets tricky for the Raptors because in modern NBA, older NBA, you could say, you know what, it's great value to even get 2 second-round picks for a player like Kris Boucher. He's expiring. He's a little bit on the older side. But this is where it gets tricky and also very interesting as to what the Raptors will do. Now, you take a look at their salary cap below where it says $160.7 million for this season in terms of salary cap. The Raptors have locked in, and next season it's at $150.7 million. Now, this is where it gets interesting because in the new CBA rules, it is an absolute luxury to have cap space, and the salary cap for next season, I believe, is supposed to be $170 million. So what the Raptors could essentially do with the player, specifically like Chris Boucher, is if they do not get an offer that they like, they can simply let him walk in free agency and then use that cap space to either sign someone to a much lesser deal and then go into next season with that much more salary cap and be able to facilitate these trades yet once again, where you're taking on bad money, bad contracts essentially, and taking, getting assets in return. And the reason I say this maybe next season more so than this season is because of the amount of teams that are unwilling to give up first round picks. You look at a team like the Nets, they are asking for 2 first round picks for Cameron Johnson, which honestly is a very reasonable asking price. But a lot of teams, it's been reported that they do not wish to give up 2 first round picks. So a lot of teams are holding on to their first round picks. So from the Raptors, you could simply say, I'm going to let Chris Boucher walk. You save that $10 million. Of course, you got Bruce Brown there as well. And that's where you save a lot of money, not including cap hold, of course, as well. But you have so much luxury. You have so much cap room to go out and sign a decent free agent. And if not, you can sign someone to a $5-7 million contract. And then when it comes to the next year's trade deadline, you can take some bad contracts in return for a heavily protected first round pick, depending on how the market goes next season. But in terms of Kelly Olynyk, this is a player I really want to talk about because he is a player that a lot of teams will want to stretch big man. 33 years old, a veteran. He's still got one more year left on his contract. So I think his situation is a little bit more different than Chris Boucher, Bruce Brown, and Davion Mitchell, because Kelly Olynyk is a player that is valued a lot around the NBA, and he doesn't make a ton of money. Bruce Brown is valued around the NBA as well, but the issue with Bruce is he makes too much money, whereas Kelly, he only makes $13 million next season. This season, he's making $12.8 million as well, and he could help teams immediately. So in terms of what the Raptors could ask for in return for Kelly Olynyk is simply to fill out a position that the Raptors are in desperate need of, particularly like the forward position, then maybe the center position, or if they're lucky enough to maybe get a player, at the second tier or third tier that is a small forward. Maybe the Raptors could do that as well to fill out different positional needs on this team as well. But again, just very interesting considering that some of this news has come around about Davion Mitchell, Chris Boucher, Kelly Olynyk. These was some of the names I had already predicted that the Raptors should look to move. It just depends on the type of picks they'll get. Again, a pick from, let's say, the Cleveland Cavaliers isn't all that attractive. It's going to be one of the last picks in the NBA draft in the second round. And at that point, you can honestly just go out and sign undrafted players as well. So again, I want to hear your thoughts on this, but we got one more thing to break down for you before we end the video. And that is that the Toronto Raptors are one of the several teams listed as favorites to land Kris Middleton. So as NBA Central was reporting, the Miami Heat are favorites to land Kris Middleton. As you see that the Raptors are second last team above Minnesota. Now you're wondering, why would the Raptors want to trade for someone like Kris Middleton? It's not so much that the Raptors wish to trade for Kris Middleton. This is simply a case of the Raptors being that third or fourth team facilitating that Jimmy Butler trade. So this is why when we talk about the Raptors being a very valuable team and having some very interesting expiring contracts, this is where the Raptors come in. The Miami Heat did say they do not want to take on long-term money. Kris Middleton's making about $30-somewhat million this season. He's got a player option for next season, which I believe he'll take, considering how injury-prone he has been. So it wouldn't surprise me. But do the Miami Heat really want a player like that that's been injury-prone? Possibly. Maybe he can turn his career around. But in terms of the Toronto Raptors, this is where it always gets fascinating, because then they'll have someone like Kris Middleton, who's obviously a little bit on the older side, doesn't necessarily fit the timeline as well. But they do have a great medical staff, as we know, based on what they did with Kawhi Leonard, and they started the whole load management movement. So in terms of Kris Middleton and his injuries, it's just sometimes a change of scenery, different medical staff. I mean, you've seen Dyson Daniels say that something was up with New Orleans, and he's glad he's out of there because he was constantly injured there. So it could be a case of medical staff, whatever the reasoning is. The Raptors could be an interesting place for him. Again, not necessarily the best situation for both, Kris Middleton and the Raptors, considering that Kris Middleton wants to win now. The Raptors are kind of in a retooling mode here where they want to win, but they're not necessarily ready to compete. Maybe they can take him on and try to flip him next year when he's an expiring contract. And again, it kind of ties back to what we were talking about in terms of taking on long-term contract money in terms for picks. Maybe they could do that, and maybe they could build up some of Kris Middleton's value as well. Realistically, I do not see the Raptors getting him though. As he states, I think Miami very likely will get him. Just considering what they want immediate win now players. And despite his injuries, Chris Middleton is still a good player when healthy. He's just had some really bad luck with some injuries the last couple seasons. But let me know your thoughts on these rumors as well. What are your thoughts on some of the players that the Raptors are looking to trade? Do you want to trade someone like Davion Mitchell? Do you want to keep Chris Boucher? Considering how well he's playing, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, I do have a trivia question for you today. And since Vince Carter got his jersey retired by the Brooklyn Nets, we know he got his jersey retired by the Toronto Raptors earlier this season. Let's talk about how many NBA teams have not retired a player's number. Is it A2? Is it B4? Is it C1? Or is it D6 teams in the NBA? So whoever answers this trivia question correctly in the comment section below gets a shout out for my next video. So that will be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. And again, I apologize. I'm a little bit under the weather if I sound off, which is why you're not seeing me on screen. So I do always appreciate your support. And that will be it for today's video. So thank you so much for watching. And I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.